Hello and welcome everybody to a new video from Jörg, Joggler66, Hour of the Truth. This is the next and I think the last but one part of the book reading The Secret History of the Jesuits. We are still in the Infernal Cycle, in the part that is called John 23rd, Pope John III removes the mask, because it deals about how the Roman Catholic Church actually, at least for people who are busy with this subject, removes the mask and shows its real face. And that, of course, also has to do with the ecumenical council they held in the 1960s, which John the 23rd opened up. I still find this a curious thing to mention to you, that you first had John the 23rd, who took a name of a pope that has been a little bit more than 1,000 years before used already, but the Roman Catholic Church does not quote-unquote accept that other John the 23rd, because that was a papal schism where there are three popes at the same time, one in Avignon, one in Rome, and one in, I think, Venice or so it was. And they were calling each other Antichrist and not accepting the power of the other. So, and one of them was John the 23rd. So that name was given to that, or was taken by that Pope in the as the successor of Pope Pius XII in 1958, and he was called John the 23rd, and when he died, just a few years later, I think it was 1964 or 1965, we had Paul the Sixth to take over. So first, and that's the curious thing that I'm talking about, we had John, then we had Paul, and when Paul died in 1978, in the year of the three popes, we had his successor, John Paul. So first John, then Paul, then John Paul. John Paul I only reigned for 33 days, then he was killed by the Jesuits, and then came John Paul II, who we know who has been until 2005 reigning until his death. But I still find it curious that you have first Pope John the 23rd, then Paul the 6th, and then John Paul the 1st and the 2nd. Coincidence? I don't know. What's the meaning behind that? I don't know. Do I care? No. I just think it's a curious fact to know and to think about for once. But now, as I announced, let's go into the last but one reading of The Secret History of the Jesuits, the book from Edmond Paris, published in 1975. We were stuck here on page 187 in the PDF, as you can see. And I want to go back to the last paragraph on page 186, where it starts: to resume its march towards the east, its clerical Drang nach Osten, means the urge to the east, march towards the east, and first retrieve the lost strongholds, the Vatican still relies upon the Germanic secular arm, its main European champion in need of new strength and vigor. At the head of federal Germany, western section of the Great Reich, it had placed a trusty man, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. I'm gonna look up a picture of Konrad Adenauer here. Let's see if I can get this to Google, because no. Okay, let's see. Just go to Google page here, google.be, and then we can go to pictures, and then we can go to Konrad Adenauer, so that you have an idea who I'm talking about. He was the chancellor. He was reigning, I think, 3 successive terms in Germany after the Second World War. Is there a picture that is a little bit bigger than that? I don't know. What is that? I don't like it when these pictures are so small. So that's easier for you to see then. I got a little bit more. And this Konrad Adenauer was a chamberlain, privy chamberlain of the Pope. That was actually the same position that also Franz von Papen was occupying. Yeah? So we need to understand, and we know by this, that Konrad Adenauer was a papist. Yeah? And what does that mean for Germany? After having been led into oblivion, into destruction by Adolf Hitler, who was a Roman Catholic, the next man coming to power is the same, again a Roman Catholic, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. As it says here, the Pope's secret chamberlain, and the politics he pursued for more than 15 years clearly display the Holy See stamp. Exhibiting at first great caution and an opportune liberal state of mind, the man his fellow countrymen nicknamed der alte Fuchs, meaning the old fox, worked at rearming his country. Of course, the quote-unquote moral rearmament of the population and of the German youth in particular was an imperative supplement to the first. That is why important posts in the ministries and administrations of Western Germany are held by many individuals with notorious Hitlerian pasts. The list is long, and captains of industry such as Krupp and Flick, who had not long since been condemned as war criminals, direct again their gigantic works which were restored to them. The end justifies the means, and this end is clear enough. To forge Siegfried's new sword, the arm necessary for revenge, a revenge which would be shared by the Vatican. Who is Siegfried? Well, you maybe don't know him, but Siegfried is a figure from the saga of the Nibelungen, an old medieval saga of Germans, a guy who bathed in the blood of a dragon he slay, and he was invincible. Not invincible, yeah, actually he was invincible, but he could not be hurt because of the dragon blood he bathed in, except for one little space on the back between his shoulders where there was falling a leaf from a tree onto when he was taking the bath in the dragon's blood. And that was his Achilles' verse, if you want to have it that way. That was the only place where he could be hurt, and that of course was the place that was used to kill him later. So that's Siegfried, who was a victorious sword fighter. That's why they used this allegory here, for in case you don't know him. Maybe you want to have a picture of that. Let's see. Nibelungen. Oh, that's so long ago since I studied that. Here you have pictures of that. Siegfried the Dragon Slayer. You see the dragon here, and by the way, the dragon, those are the names given to dinosaurs before 1841, because that word was only invented in 1841. Before that, quote-unquote dinosaurs were dragons, and they were roaming with men from the beginning, because they were created by God at the same time, just a few days earlier or so, before men was created. No, on day 6 he created all animals and men at the end. So, created on the same day. So that's the Nibelungen. Yeah? Okay, you can see that this is not too big, the picture, but you know. That's gotta be enough for you to learn of this saga. That's why he uses here the word Siegfried, to forge Siegfried's new sword, the arm necessary for revenge, a revenge which would be shared by the Vatican. It is then with the perfect synchronism that the Chancellor Chamberlain, during an interview given to a Dutch periodical, echoed the fulminating speech Cardinal Ottaviani had just expressed. The peaceful coexistence of nations whose views are totally opposite is just an illusion which, alas, still finds too many supporters. Yeah, and it even found too many supporters during the quote-unquote Cold War. because that's the thing that it was all about at that time. I mean, let's be honest about that. The peaceful coexistence of nations whose views are totally opposite, well, that is just what the Jesuits use all over the world to control the whole world, you know? Communism on the one hand, capitalism on the other. Coexistence. How could the United States and the USSR coexist? Well, they could if it wasn't for the interventions of the Jesuits, who always liked to sow seeds of violence, war, hatred, and that's what they did, and that's what was the whole Cold War was all about. Peaceful coexistence of nations whose views are totally opposite is just an illusion, which still finds too many supporters. The incendiary sermon given on the 7th of January at Sainte Marie Majeure, preceded by a few days, as by accident, the visit of Konrad Adenauer to Rome. The reports the press gave were anonymous at underlining the friendly and sympathetic atmosphere which prevailed during the private audience His Holiness John the 23rd gave to the German Chancellor and his Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. von Brentano. Yeah. We could even read in L'Aurore, quote, "This meeting provoked a rather unexpected declaration from the Chancellor when answering the pontifical address which praised the courage and faith of the German government's head. Quote, I think that God has given the German people a special part to play in these troubled times, to be the protector of the West against the powerful influences of the East threatening us." Unquote. Yeah, now all of a sudden they needed Western Germany to be a protector of Eastern Germany, Poland, Romania, Hungary, and all the other Soviet states like the Soviet Union. Yeah, it was a bulwark against the quote-unquote axis of evil, as it was also called, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the USSR was always to be understood as an evil nation in the time, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, combat accurately noted, we had heard this before, but in a more condensed manner. God mit uns, or God with us. That was the motto of the belt buckle of the German soldiers in the 1914-18 First World War. And that newspaper even added, quote, Dr. Adenauer's evocation of the work attributed to the German nation found its inspiration in a similar declaration from the previous pontiff. We are therefore allowed to presume that if Dr. Adenauer pronounced this phrase in the present circumstances, it is because he thought his listeners were ready to hear him. Unquote. In fact, one would have to be singularly naive and utterly ignorant of elementary diplomacy to think that this unexpected declaration was not part of the program. We wager also that it did not cast any shadow over the prolonged conversation Mr. Adenauer had with Cardinal Tardini, the Holy See Secretary of State, whom he entertained for luncheon at the German embassy. Unexpected declaration was not part of the program? We should not think that? No, of course not, because in politics never anything happens that was not planned that way. Yeah? So there is no unexpected declaration. Let me assure you that. The spectacular intrusion of the Holy Office and international politics voiced by Cardinal Ottaviani shocked even Catholics who were long accustomed to the Roman Church's encroachments in the affairs of state. Now let's see if we can get a picture of Cardinal Ottaviani. That would be probably more interesting than having a picture of Siegfried here, I guess. Yeah. Let's just see. That must be him. Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani. So, have a look at this picture and these pictures here. This is the guy we are going to talk about in the next few minutes. The spectacular intrusion of the Holy Office in international politics voiced by Cardinal Ottaviani, so that means that he probably was the voice of the Inquisition at that time, because we are speaking about the Holy Office, and the Holy Office is the name at that time given to the Inquisition, which is today, again, names changed a few years ago, into the Holy Office of the Congregation of the Faith. Okay? Shocked even Catholics who were long accustomed to the Roman Church's encroachments in the affairs of state. Rome was aware of it, but the perpetuation of the Cold War is so vitally important to the Vatican's political power and even its financial prosperity that it did not hesitate repeating such political views, even though the first one had been badly received. The journey Mr. Khrushchev made to France on March 1960 gave it another opportunity. Now this is very interesting. Listen closely. Dijon was one of the cities the Soviet leader was to visit. Like all his colleagues in the same situation, the mayor of Dijon had to welcome courteously the guest of the French Republic. The chief city of Burgundy had an ecclesiastic as its deputy mayor, Canon Kerr. It's Burgundy, not Burgundy, because Dijon is on the Côte d'Or, on the top of the Burgundy wine region in France. That's why it's Burgundy, not Burgundy. Anyway, according to the canonical law, the Holy See had expressly authorized the priest to accept this double mandate, being a priest and a mayor on the other hand, with all the functions and duties entailed. However, his bishop forbade the mayor canon to receive Mr. Khrushchev. On that occasion, the municipal sash had to give way to the cassock. So, the chief city of Burgundy had an ecclesiastic as its deputy mayor, Canon Kirk. He was occupying the office of mayor and occupying the office of a priest. The canonical law expressly authorized the priest to accept this double mandate. So the church says it's okay, but the bishop forbade the mayor canon to receive Mr. Khrushchev. So the visitor was welcomed by an assistant who stood in for the absent deputy mayor. But the unconstrained manner in which the hierarchy scoffed at civil authority on that occasion aroused the sharpest comments. On the 30th of March, Le Monde, the French newspaper, wrote, quote, "Who is actually exercising authority over the mayor of Dijon? The bishop or the prefect? Means the spiritual or the temporal power? And above these representatives of a central power, the Pope or the French government? This is the question asked in everyone." Yeah, this comes when you have a combination of church and state that is absolutely illegitimate. But that is something that you have in the Roman Catholic Church and that you also have in Islam. They both combined church and state. So then, of course, you come into a conflict in this case, and you ask yourself, but who is now the one that has the power? Who is really reigning? Because we have on the local level, we have the mayor of Dijon, who has power over him, the bishop because he's also a priest, or the prefect because of the civil power. And above these, well, in the United States you would say federal level, this is a national level because France is not a federal state. Above these representatives of a central power, the Pope or the French government. So the bishop and the mayor on the one hand, or the Pope and the president on the other? A question to be asked in everyone. The answer is not doubtful. Theocracy first, meaning the spiritual power reigns over the temporal power. That has been the policy of the Roman Catholic Church from the get-go, and it still is today. This is why in the Vatican flag the the silver power is overlaid by the golden power, I mean the key, okay? This is why the silver key is under the golden key. You see very distinct here in this picture, even though the resolution is not that nice, you see it, that the golden key is above the silver key. And you knew that, of course, but I just wanted to remind to you during this reading and putting up this picture here, that we are reminded that the spiritual power is always above the temporal power according to Roman Catholic canon law. So the answer is not doubtful. Theocracy first. First the spiritual and then the temporal power. But from now on to be received by a cassock-wearing mayor, will the guests of the French Republic have to be supplied with confession tickets? In the aforementioned article, the editor of Le Monde also rightly says, quote, "Beyond this French interior question," and this is only because in French this happens that the mayor is also a priest at the same time, "the Kerr affair brings to our notice a larger problem. The Vatican's action is not concerned only with the relations between a mayor and his government. In the way it took place, it constitutes a direct and spectacular intervention in international diplomacy." Unquote. So, this is certainly true, and the reactions this affair provoked nearly everywhere show that its import was clearly understood by world opinion. The United States of America, especially the public, which had already witnessed the hostile demonstrations organized by the Cardinal Spellman and Cushing during Mr. Khrushchev's visit, started to question the real independence a Roman Catholic president would preserve with regard to the Holy See. Many feared, in that case, to see the foreign politics of the country bent in favor of the Roman Church's interest. To the prejudice of the nation's interests, no small danger in any circumstances, but above all in the present situation. Now, let's read this again. Many feared in that case to see the foreign politics of the country bent in favor of the Roman Church's interests, to the prejudice of the nation's interest, no small danger. Do you remember Colonel Beck? I don't know, I think we go back to him a little bit later in the reading of this book. Colonel Beck of Poland, who said after Second World War broke out that he too late understood that the foreign policy of his country was in the interest of the Vatican instead of Poland, the country that he was serving. Yeah? The resistance to the move for an East-West détente was then organized openly after the bomb thrown by Cardinal Ottaviani. Okay, that's his picture here. Let's have that a little bit on. A ridiculous instrument, some may say, compared with those which threatened to bury under ruins, sooner or later, nations mad enough to remain in the deadlock of a snarling antagonism. But we can see that the Vatican, compelled to use spiritual arms, endeavored to make the best of them. The Jesuits, who steer its diplomacy, were doing their uttermost to ward off the worst calamity which ever hovered over the Holy See, an international accord which excluded resorting to war. What would become of the Vatican's prestige, its political importance, and all the advantages, pecuniary and others, which proceeded from it if, because of such an accord, it could not plot any more, use its influence, haggle over its cooperations with governments, favor some, bully others, oppose nations, create conflicts for the benefit of its own interests, and, if to serve its immoderate ambitions, it could not find any more soldiers? No one can be deceived, and the Jesuits, even less than others, a general disarmament would toll the knell of the Roman Church as a world power, and the spiritual head itself would totter. We must then expect to see the sons of Loyola opposing, with all their arsenal of tricks, the desire for peace of nations and governments. To ruin the edifice whose foundations are tentatively laid, they will not spare their minds and counter-minds. It is a war without mercy. It is a holy war, means a crusade, sparked off by Cardinal Ottaviani's mad speech. And the company of Jesus will pursue it with the blind obstinacy of the insect, ad majorem papae gloriam, instead of ad majorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God, for the greater glory of the Pope, without any anxiety as to the catastrophes which will result. The world must perish rather than the supremacy of the Roman Pontiff. And that's why they use this fear that they used in the time of the Cold War of the nuclear annihilation. Instead of the Pope losing his power, the world will vanish or perish. But we know that that will not be, because the Bible says otherwise. But this actually is the way of thinking of the Jesuits and the way of thinking of the Roman Catholic Church. The supremacy of the Roman Pontiff is more important than the existence of this world. The world must perish rather than the supremacy of the Roman Pontiff. That is the prerogative of the politics of the Roman Catholic Church, and that is the prerogative of the politics of the Jesuit order. And we come into a little publisher's note at the end of this chapter here. Edmund Paris was at a disadvantage in that he wasn't aware that a shift was already underway by the whore of Revelation to fulfill Bible prophecy. She is prepared for all eventualities. The Jesuits evaluated World War III and decided the US would lose, and the Vatican always goes with the winner. Since then, she has enthusiastically thrown her support to Moscow and even acquired a communist pope from Poland. She is secretly preparing a concordat with Russia and currently pushing a Marxist gospel worldwide. The Jesuits are currently behind the disarmament movement to subdue the United States. Moscow will serve the Vatican as the muscle to conquer nations where Roman Catholicism will be the only religion tolerated worldwide. Russia will be pushed to attack Israel, fulfilling the prophecies of the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, and the Antichrist of the Vatican will await his doom at the second coming of Christ. Well, I absolutely agree with this last part of the sentence. The Antichrist of the Vatican will await his doom at the second coming of Christ. That's no question, because that is written in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8. But I am not sure about Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 deal with a quote-unquote Israel in our modern times, because this Israel in our modern times is just needed for the necessary replay of the Roman Catholic Church of Daniel's 70th week that Jesus Christ fulfilled completely and truly and fully 2,000 years ago. I'm not sure about this and how, in which way Jack Chick, who is the publisher of this book, this JTC standing for Jack T. Chick, and how far that he is deceived also by the futurist lie of this tribulation, 7-year tribulation, and even the rapture, which is completely unbiblical. I'm quite sure that Jack Chick publication is aware of this, but I don't know how Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 go in there, and this is something that you have to study on your own, that I cannot discuss here with you in this book. So when you want to gain a bigger understanding of what the publisher Jack Chick writes here about this little note that he puts in this book, and you want to understand this in the light of Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, then you have to read and understand that for yourself. I'm not gonna go into that. I even do not agree that it says here the Jesuits evaluated World War III and decided the US would lose. I'm not sure if the US would lose, but there's one thing that we have to make clear, and that we have to understand. And whether this note of Jack Chick here is correct or not correct, the point is, when we read Revelation 13, we understand that there are two beasts. We know that the first beast, the beast out of the sea, is the Vatican. And the woman that rides that beast is the Roman Catholic Church. We know that there is a second beast coming out of the earth, and that beast is the United States of America. And that beast creates an image of the first beast, means also it becomes like the first beast, and makes everyone in the earth to bow down to the first beast. Okay, that's so far for Revelation 13. But then we go into Revelation 17, and there it only speaks of one beast, and that is the Vatican that is left over. So at a certain moment the United States have to disappear, have to vanish from the face of the earth. I agree, but I am not sure if the author is correct when he says that the United States would lose World War III. I don't know what's going to happen. The United States could win World War III, they could lose World War III, they could win, and then after that being usurped, of course, by the first beast. Also possible. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I think it is interesting, this little footnote, to evaluate that also. And to take into account what Jack Chick here writes. And he is of course correct that he says that Edmund Paris was at a disadvantage at the time because he wasn't aware that a shift was already underway. And we know that today because we have dealt with the Holy Alliance. Yeah, I'm going to show you that once again, for in case you don't remember. Holy Alliance. And that sorry, sometimes I'm just bad at typing. So we have the Holy Alliance that I spoke of in the reading of Rulers of Evil. That is already in the very first chapter of Rulers of Evil. How President Reagan and the Pope, the Antichrist, conspired to assist Poland's solidarity movement and hasten the demise of communism. Well, this of course is something that Edmund Paris was not aware of, because he published his book in 1975, and this Holy Alliance article is from 1992, and we are speaking of a conspiracy between the American president and the Antichrist in the 1980s during the reign of Ronald Reagan in the United States of America, which brought down communism and especially the Berlin Wall in 1989. So that's 14 years after the publishing of this book. So of course Edmund Paris has here a disadvantage. In how far for the rest the words of Jack Chick here are true, I don't know. I don't want to evaluate. I don't want to give it any value at all. I think we as Christians, as Bible-believing, Jesus-following Christians, shouldn't even care about that. All this politics should be far away from our beds. We should not care about that. Let them do whatever they want. We have Jesus Christ. The only thing that we have to do is what I'm doing here with readings like this. Spread the gospel, spread the word of Jesus Christ to every creature in the world, and make sure that a lot of people, that as many people as you can reach, are not deceived by these politics. Expose these politics, but don't mingle into them. Don't start to make predictions of them. This is what I don't like here in the editor's note from Jack Chick. This is quote-unquote making predictions. Well, if you really want to... I don't make a prediction when I say God wrote the end of beforehand, and in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8 it is said that Jesus at his second coming will consume the Antichrist with the power of his mouth, through the spirit of his mouth. Yeah? That's no prediction that I'm making. That is reading the Bible. And of course, when you read all through the book of Revelation, you know that the Roman Catholic Church will vanish. When you read through Daniel chapter 2, you know that the stone that is not cut out with hands will eventually destroy all worldly powers, all worldly kingdoms at the time of Jesus' second coming. Yeah, the statue will be will put into powder the gold, the silver, the brass, and the iron, and that will be blown away with the wind, and then that stone that hit the statue in the feet will become a mighty stone, a mountain, covering the whole earth and being a kingdom that will reign forever and ever, the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Those are not any predictions of mine. This is just reading Bible prophecy and telling you what the Bible says will happen. When Jack Chick here, with his editor's note, speaks about that the Jesuits evaluated World War III and decided thus and so, I think that is personal opinion, and I do not necessarily share that opinion. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand why I'm talking about this. Okay? So, we are still in the book The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris, and as you see here, we have come to the part that is called the conclusion. Let's see how the camera is working, because before I had this little picture here with the little red dot. Ah yeah, there it is now. Okay, that it was working, so I didn't need to check this. So we have come now to the conclusion on page 190, so that means we have about 7 pages left, and I will probably not go through all the 7 pages right now. So this is why I said this is the probably last but one part, and I have a little surprise for you at the last part anyway. A positive surprise, by the way. So, we have recapitulate. Yeah, someday I learn how to read. Tom Fraser always says when he encounters things like this. We have recapitulated in this book the main manifestations of the multiform activity deployed by the Company of Jesus during 4 centuries, yeah, from the start in 1540 until the end of the Second World War, 1945. That's exactly about 4 centuries. We have established also that the militant, even military character of this famous and ultramontane institution fully justifies the title often attributed to it, the secret army of the papacy. To the front of the action, for the glory of God and especially of the Holy See, is the order these ecclesiastical soldiers gave themselves, and of which they are proud. At the same time, they endeavor, through the book and pious press, which they supervise, to disguise as much as possible and present as apostolic enterprises the action they exercise in their favorite field, the nation's politics. The clever camouflage, the protestations of innocence, the railleries about the quote-unquote dark schemings attributed to them by the disordered imagination of their enemies, and which are groundless according to them, all this is outweighed by the enormous hostility of public opinion towards them, always and everywhere, and by the inevitable reaction to their intrigues which brought about their expulsion from every country, even from the most strongly Catholic. And I explained to you more than enough that the expulsion from every country was a planned incident by, at that time, Lorenzo Ricci, to make sure the order of the Jesuits got a deadly blow, hid behind the Illuminati for the time of their suppression between 1773 and 1814, and then came up as a most and for all more secular order. These 56 expulsions, being thrown out of 65 countries, to quote only the main ones, provide an invincible argument. It would be sufficient to prove the evil nature of this order. How could it not be injurious to civil societies, as it is the papacy's most efficacious instrument in imposing its law on temporal governments, and that this law, by nature, has no consideration for the various national interests? The Holy See, being essentially opportunist, does embrace these interests when they coincide with its own. We saw this happen in 1914 and 1939, meaning when the interests of the nation were the same as the Roman papacy's. And this is why Adolf Hitler stated that he has never seen a more splendorous hierarchy than that of the Roman Catholic Church, and that is why Van Papen said, that is the sentence I actually wanted to quote, that the German Reich was the first world power not only to implement but also to put into action the principles of the Roman Church. This is why we saw this happen in 1914 and in 1939. But if it brings them a substantial help, then the final result is not beneficial for all that. That was seen in 1918 and 1945. You see how important this little sentence is to understand? In 1914 and 1939, at the outbreak of World War I and the outbreak of World War II, the nation that started this war had the same interests as the Holy See, and in 1918, at the end of World War I and in 1945, these interests were not the same anymore, and that's why the world wars ended, and that is why Germany got smashed. Terrible to its enemies, or those who oppose it, the Vatican, this amphibious clerical political organization, is even more deadly to its friends. By observing some vigilance, one can be forewarned of its underhand thrusts, but its embraces are deadly. On that subject, Mr. T. Young wrote in 1874 the following lines, which have not grown old in the meantime, at the writing of this book, 100 years old. The power of France is in inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. This is a very interesting sentence. And let's make sure that especially my American brethren understand the sentence very well. Because let us just replace the word France with the United States of America. The power of the United States of America is in inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. Of course, Edmond Paris writes this book from a French perspective. He was a Frenchman. But I am reading this book to you, also to my brethren in the United States of America, to help you understand European history, and with European history, the history of the Jesuits, and with that also the history of your own country. And when we replace the United States of America, or France, with the United States of America in this sentence, it is quite obvious what pickle you're in today in the United States of America. The power of the United States of America is in inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. I mean, I don't have to analyze every little word in this little sentence. You understand what it is written here? The power of the United States of America will decline in the same ratio as is the intensity to her obedience to the Roman Catholic Church, to the whore of Babylon. In other words, the more the United States listens to and lets the Roman Catholic Church rule in her country, the more power it loses. And I am speaking not of power in the world, because America has a lot of power in the world right now in 2018, but it does not have any power of its own anymore. It is completely ruled by a foreign pontiff, by a foreign Caesar, by a foreign power. The United States of America is ruled by Rome. And who is the dupe? Well, about 300 million people living in that country, having to pay for that. So what the author writes here, or what Mr. Young wrote in 1874, speaking of France, is today in 2018 and even some years ago the same, valid for the United States of America. And let me assure you, for Germany, for Belgium, for Italy, for Spain, for Russia, for China, for Thailand, for Vietnam, for Japan, for Brazil, for Mexico. I mean, you can put any name in here. What Mr. Young wrote is universally to be understood. And with universally in this case, sorry, I don't mean Catholic. No, but I mean you can put any name in here, any country in there. The power of your country that you are living in is an inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. Just scrap France, just scrap the United States, just scrap Germany, wherever country you are in, put in the name of your country. The power of any country is an inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. This is what you should understand from this very important sentence. And from a more recent witness, not 1874, but a little bit later, we read Joseph Ours. When studying the effect of our very relative disobedience, he wrote, quote, "There's no doubt about it. Right through the continent, and maybe today all over the globe, wherever Catholicism is tempted to become political, it is also tempted to become anti-French." Again, end quote, again he writes this from a French point of view. Let's read, instead of anti-French, let's read anti-nationalistic, anti-patriotic if you want. There's no doubt about it. Right through the continent and all over the globe probably, wherever Catholicism is tempted to become political, it is also tempted to become anti-nationalistic. Nationalistic meant in the country that we are dealing with. A just remark indeed, even though the term tempted is rather weak. I agree. We will nevertheless conclude that to obey would be more to the point. Is it not better, in fact, to expose oneself to this hostility rather than to have come to this conclusion, like Colonel Beck? I mentioned him a few sentences before. Colonel, why doesn't he just want to copy this here? Colonel Beck. I'm going to show you the picture again. He comes from one of the earlier readings. Oh, I don't get it. Sometimes this computer really makes me mad. Beck. So, here's Joseph Beck, who we talk about. Again, is it not better, in fact, to expose oneself to this hostility rather than to have to come to this conclusion, like Colonel Beck, former Foreign Affairs Minister of the very Catholic Poland? And we read about that earlier in this book, as the footnote 2a tells us. It is from the declaration made on the 6th of February 1940, so after the outbreak of the Second World War, because Poland was overwon with the quote-unquote Blitzkrieg, starting in September 1939. 6 weeks later it was completely conquered. This declaration was made on the 6th of February 1940 during the Second World War, after the defeat of Poland by Colonel Beck, Foreign Affairs Minister of Catholic Poland, who says, and I'm going to highlight it for you, "The Vatican is one of those principally responsible for the tragedy of my country. I realized too late that we had pursued our foreign politics just to serve the sole interests of the Catholic Church." Unquote. So that means that the interests of the foreign politics of Poland did not serve the country Poland, but did only serve the Roman Catholic Church. How is that any different from today, from the United States of America? I mean, all your nationalistic and patriotic feelings aside, what does America have to do with about 200 military bases all over the world? Why does America have to be the policeman all over the world? Is your country therefore any safer? Any more secure? Do you have any more security? Do you have any more peace, any more freedom because of that? No, you don't. Look at 9/11 and what happened after that. What Colonel Beck said here in 1940 still counts today for the United States of America. But the problem is that your minister, your Secretary of Foreign Politics, your foreign minister, or even your quote-unquote Secretary of Defense, which is actually the Secretary of War, that's the name they bore earlier, that is much more true, they are dealing for the Pope. They are working for the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. They are working for the Jesuits. They are working for Satan's agenda, and not for the agenda and not for the prospering of the United States of America itself. Exactly as Colonel Beck says here in 1940 about Poland, this could be, if one of your generals would speak, one or other great general in the United States of America saying that to the American public. But if anybody dared to do that, he would be done away with, of course. But really, let the sentence sink in and think about what kind of politics does the United States of America pursue in foreign politics. What do you have to do with North Korea? What do you have to do with China? What do you have to do with Iran? What do you have to do with Syria? Nothing. Why don't you care for your own country? Well, because your politics are not based on national interests, but on interests of the Pope. And no, this is not American bashing, because the same works for all the countries in the European Union, where I live. We are all together in this organization called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Yeah? And all the countries in there do the same bidding, do the bidding of the Pope. The United States of America leads the NATO, but all the other countries in there do the same. I mean, whether you lead or you follow is not important. The direction you go is important. And the direction we go is always fighting the wars for the papacy, not our own interests. And that's what Joseph Beck said here. That's what, first of all, Mr. Young said here in 1874. The power of your nation is in inverse ratio to the intensity of her obedience to the Roman Curia. And what Beck said in 1940, the Vatican is one of those principally responsible for the tragedy of my country. I realized too late that we had pursued our foreign politics just to serve the sole interests of the Catholic Church. And that's especially the way with the second beast of Revelation 13, the United States of America. So what can you do about it? well, stop supporting stop supporting your country in every way that you can, and make your peace with Jesus Christ, and oppose these leaders who are not biblical but are doing the biddings of Satan. And wake up your family, wake up your neighbors, wake up your city, wake up as much people as you can to the real truth, and don't pick up any arms. Jesus said, don't do harm to any man. Thou shalt not kill. So what do you need guns for? You should put on the whole armor of God, as in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 18. Yeah? Because we are fighting against powers and spiritual wickedness in high places, and not a carnal fight. I think this sentence from Colonel Beck here is one of the most important sentences of this whole book, because he, as one of the pawns that was used by the Roman Catholic Church, by the Jesuits, came out and said this. The Vatican is one of those principally responsible for the tragedy of my country, says Colonel Beck from Poland, but you can insert any country here. I realized too late that we had pursued our foreign politics just to serve the sole interests of the Catholic Church, not the most interest or mostly the interests of the Roman Catholic Church. No. The sole interests. No other foreign politics interests were pursued except those of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's the way it is today in Germany, in all of Europe, and in the United States of America. Now please wake up to this fact. Moreover, the author continues, the fate of the very apostolic empire of the Habsburgs was not too encouraging. As for Germany, so dear to the hearts of popes, and especially Antichrist Pius XII, she could not be pleased finally with the costly favors their holiness lavished on her. In fact, we wonder if the Roman Church reaped any profit at all from this mad aspiration to govern the world, a pretension kept alive by the Jesuits more than anyone else. In the course of 4 centuries in which these firebrands spread strife and hatred, slaughter and ruins in Europe, from the 30 Years' War until the Hitler Crusade, the second 30 Years' War, the one from 1618 through 1648, and the other from 1914 through 1945, the Hitler Crusade, did the Church enjoy gain or suffer loss? Well, the answer is easy. The clearest and most incontestable result is a continuous diminution of the heritage of St. Peter, a sad end to so many crimes. Did the Jesuits' influence obtain better results within the Vatican itself? It's very doubtful. A Catholic author wrote, "They always aim at concentrating the ecclesiastical power which they control. The Pope's infallibility exasperates bishops and governments. They nevertheless ask for it at the Council of Trent and obtain it at the Vatican Council in 1870. The Company's prestige fascinates within the Church its adversaries as much as its friends. We have respect, or at least we fear it. We think we can do anything, and we behave accordingly." Unquote. Another Catholic writer strongly stated the effects of this concentration of power in the pontiff's hands. Quote, "The Society of Jesus was suspicious of life, the source of heresy, and opposed authority to it. The Council of Trent seems already to be the Testament of Catholicism. It is the last genuine council." This is one of the most important sentences I think we can read in this book. I mean, there are so many sentences, that's why the whole book is interesting or important. you know. But we have to understand that the ultramontane rule in Rome, and that the ultramontane always want a complete return back to the Council of Trent policies. The Council of Trent seems already to be the testament of Catholicism. When you read what was decided at the Council of Trent, then you will understand what actually is the policy of the Roman Catholic Church, what is the policy of ultramontanism, and that's it. There is a book out that you can read about the Council of Trent. Let's see if I can just get the picture in here of Trent. It is this one. Yeah, just don't. Oh no! Catechism of the Council of Trent. Yeah, the Catechism of the Council of Trent. Get this book. Read this book, and you will know what the Council of Trent stands for. The Council of Trent is the foundation of the Roman Catholic Church. There is no doubt about it. I just bought a book with all the Roman Catholic anathemas in it. All these anathemas are based on that Council of Trent. I don't go into that. I don't have that book yet. I ordered it, and it's in German, so I won't read it to you anyway. I'll read it on my channel, but not to you because you are English spoken. I don't have it in English. But I also have this book, which I just put the picture in here. This one. But you know, the Catechism of the Council of Trent. But I don't think that I should read that whole book, because this is a monumental work, and wow, this is interesting to have and to look at this and that. So I advise you, everyone who doesn't understand that last quote that I read, the Council of Trent seems already to be the testament of Catholicism. If you don't understand the sentence, then get this book, the Catechism of the Council of Trent, and please read it for yourself. Read it and understand it, and you will get what ultramontanism is, you will get what the policy of the Jesuits is, you will get what the policy of the Vatican is, you will get what the policy of the Roman Catholic Church is, you will get what the Antichrist stands for when you read that book. And if you don't read that book, then at least listen to all the readings of this book that I just read to you, The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. Or get the book from Theodor Griesinger from 1866, which I'm reading in German. You can get that for free in English also as a PDF. Get it, read it, understand what the Jesuits stand for, understand what the Roman Catholic Church stands for, not what they tell exoterically outside in the exoteric teaching, but what they stand for esoterically, the inner teaching, the teaching of the initiator, the teaching of the people in the know. That is a different one. And then turn back to this book reading and see everything that I tell you here confirmed with your own investigation, with your own research. That is so important, because it is your own research that counts. I'm a little bit over an hour, and we will continue next time with the conclusion of the book The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris. And I urge you to do your own studies, and never ever forget, the most important study of all is the study of the Bible. The 1611 authorized version of the King James Bible is the first study you should do. And then everything else follows. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for commenting. And until next time, Jörg from Jogner66 says God bless you and bye-bye.
Especially I work in dealing with the infiltration of churches and religious institutions as well as government. That cover a tremendous number of institutions.
And the purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government.
Simply put, this country and this world benefit from your commitment to Jesuit principles, to being men.
As a graduate of another great Jesuit institution, Xavier University, I have great affection for the value and purpose of a Jesuit education.
What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously.
What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Holy Father, on behalf of Michelle and myself, welcome to the White House.
There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government. Of course, both, because you can see that even the Pope and his own individual office, he meet those requirements. He is not only the head of his church, as he called himself, John Paul II, the present Pope. He said he is the pastor of his church. He is not only that, but he is the head of his state.
It is a sign, perhaps, of how far we have come in this country that today's news of formal recognition between the governments of the United States and the Vatican did not create a furor. Once upon a time, it would have. Once upon a time, and not all that long ago, it did.
From the time of President Washington, that was the first president to be utilized by the Jesuits. If you were not aware of that, President Washington already was initiated by the Jesuits to bring about the first communication with the Vatican ever known in this country. From there on, President Reagan, throughout all this time, President Reagan has come to fulfill the greatest moment in the history of this conspiracy.